Right now, as you're watching this, the United Kingdom is sitting on the edge of something that has not happened in over a century of May weather records. Forecasters are not just talking about a warm bank holiday. They are talking about a genuine, record-shattering, history-making heat event that could push temperatures in southern England to a level that most people in this country have never experienced in springtime. And the number at the center of every conversation, every weather model, every alert being issued right now is 35 degrees Celsius. So the question everyone is asking is simple. Could it actually happen? And what does science really say about probability? Let's start with what is already confirmed, because even without reaching 35, what is already unfolding across the UK right now is extraordinary. According to yourweather.co.uk, the UK's first heat wave of 2026 is looking increasingly likely, with temperatures forecast to climb into the low 30s over the bank holiday weekend. That alone would be remarkable for late May. But forecasters are also monitoring a more extreme scenario, one where conditions align perfectly and temperatures climb even higher than the most likely outcome. And that extreme scenario is what has put 35 degrees on the map as a real, if low probability, possibility. The setup for this heat event began days before the bank holiday weekend even arrived. Temperatures started rising steadily as a plume of warm air began tracking northwards from Spain and Portugal, two countries that have themselves been baking under some of the most intense spring heat Europe has seen in recent memory. By Friday of this week, parts of southern England were already nudging 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. That is not typical for late May in Britain. That is the kind of reading you usually associate with July, maybe August if you are lucky. And it was just the beginning. High pressure built and strengthened across the UK and nearby parts of Europe, locking out any cooler Atlantic air and allowing the warmth to intensify day by day. What made this pattern particularly potent was the positioning of that high pressure system. When high pressure centers itself directly over the British Isles rather than sitting out to the west, it creates a very specific set of conditions. Long spells of sunshine, light winds, dry air, and crucially, a mechanism for temperatures to keep climbing rather than plateauing. The bank holiday weekend arrived with that system almost perfectly positioned, and that is why the forecasts have been so consistent in their direction, even if the exact peak temperature remains uncertain. The hottest weather during this event is expected between Sunday and Tuesday, with temperatures widely reaching the high 20s or low 30s across southern Britain. Many areas of England and Wales are expected to enjoy long spells of sunshine and light winds across those days. For most of the country, this will feel like a genuine summer preview, warm enough to head to the beach, fill up the parks, and make the most of a long weekend in a way that British bank holidays so rarely allow. But in a belt of southern England stretching from the home counties down through Kent, Sussex, and parts of the southeast, the atmosphere is being watched very closely for signs that conditions could tip into something even more intense. Here is where the 35-degree question becomes genuinely interesting, and where the science behind modern weather forecasting reveals just how complex temperature prediction really is. According to yourweather.co.uk, while temperatures of 30 to 33 degrees Celsius are currently the most likely outcome, the Met Office has highlighted a roughly 10% chance that temperatures could climb as high as 35 degrees somewhere in southern England. A 10% probability sounds small, but in meteorological terms it is not negligible. It means that out of every 10 versions of this weather pattern that forecasters model, one of them ends with temperatures at that level. The question is whether this particular real-world version is that one. What could push temperatures from the expected 30 to 33 range all the way to 35? The answer lies in a combination of factors that are difficult to predict several days in advance, but which, if they all align, can make an enormous difference to the final peak reading. Cloud cover is one of the most critical variables. Even a thin layer of cloud sitting over southern England during the afternoon hours can reduce incoming solar radiation enough to cap temperatures several degrees below what a completely clear sky would allow. On the other hand, if skies remain completely cloudless through the peak heating hours of late morning and early afternoon, there is nothing to prevent the ground from absorbing maximum solar energy and releasing it back into the atmosphere as heat. Wind direction matters enormously too. A wind that swings slightly more from the southeast, drawing air that has spent longer over the heated continental landmass of Europe, would carry additional warmth compared to a wind that has crossed more of the English Channel. And the exact position of the high pressure center, even by just a few hundred miles, can determine whether the atmosphere is configured to allow maximum temperature development or not. Small changes in cloud cover, wind direction, and the exact position of high pressure can make a significant difference to peak temperatures several days in advance. That is not a weakness in weather forecasting. It is simply the reality of trying to model a chaotic atmospheric system at the margins of its possible behavior. The most likely outcome is still the low 30s. But 35 remains physically possible, and that is exactly what forecasters have communicated. Now let's put 35 degrees in May into historical context, because that number means something very specific when you look at what the UK has recorded in this month throughout its entire meteorological history. The UK's all-time May temperature record stands at 32.8 degrees Celsius, set back in 1922, over 100 years ago. That record has stood through every warm bank holiday, every early summer heatwave, every unseasonably hot spring day the country has experienced since then. If temperatures during this bank holiday weekend were to reach even 33 degrees, that record would fall. If they were to reach 35, it would not just fall, it would be shattered. And the new record would stand as one of the most dramatic temperature readings ever measured in the UK outside of the height of summer. For comparison, the warmest May bank holiday on record before this weekend was 28.7 degrees Celsius, reached in 2018. That figure is almost certain to be exceeded this year. And that statistic alone illustrates just how far outside normal territory this heat event sits. It is not just a warm bank holiday, it is a potentially once-in-a-century weather moment playing out in real time, and the people of southern England are sitting right in the middle of it. The UK Health Security Agency, working alongside the Met Office, understood the significance of what was being built and acted quickly. Heat health alerts were issued across much of the Midlands and southeast England, running through to Wednesday, the 27th of May. Normally, the UKHSA does not begin issuing heat health alerts until the 1st of June, reflecting the fact that temperatures capable of posing a health risk this early in the season are historically unusual. The fact that alerts were triggered in late May, before the official heat health alert season had even begun, speaks volumes about how exceptional this particular event is. Dr. Anya Gottfert, a public health consultant at the UKHSA, stated that this first heat health alert of the summer season is an important reminder that sustained periods of warm weather can pose a real risk to the most vulnerable, particularly the elderly and those with underlying health conditions. The concern is not just about the peak temperature on the hottest afternoon. Heat events become genuinely dangerous when warmth accumulates over multiple days and nights, preventing bodies from recovering. When temperatures remain elevated overnight, when humidity climbs, when there is no cool break to offer relief, the cumulative physiological strain on vulnerable people becomes severe. Health professionals worry most about overnight temperatures during these events because sleep is when the body does its most important recovery work, and that recovery is disrupted when bedroom temperatures stay uncomfortably warm. During the July 2025 heatwave in the UK, some locations experienced what meteorologists call tropical nights, when temperatures fail to drop below 20 degrees Celsius overnight. The risk of those conditions returning during this bank holiday event is real, particularly in London, and the densely built-up areas of southeast England, where the urban heat island effect adds several degrees to nighttime readings compared to surrounding rural areas. The mechanism driving this heat into the UK deserves some explanation, because it is not simply warm air blowing in from a hotter country. The warm air originating from Spain and Portugal provides the initial warmth in the air mass, but as that air travels northward and eventually descends under the influence of high pressure over the UK, something additional happens. When air descends from higher altitude to lower altitude, it gets compressed by the increasing atmospheric pressure below. That compression warms the air further in a process called adiabatic warming. This is the same physics that makes a bicycle pump feel hot when you pump it rapidly. The air heats as it is compressed, depending on how much descent occurs and over what distance. Adiabatic warming can add several additional degrees to the temperature of an air mass, turning a warm afternoon into a potentially record-breaking one. This process has been identified as a key feature of several of the most intense UK heat waves in recent years, and it appears to be playing a role in the current event as well. The question of how a 10% probability translates to real-world experience is worth dwelling on. 10% means that in the majority of similar weather setups, temperatures would peak somewhere between 30 and 33 degrees. That is still a remarkable outcome for May. But 10% also means this is not a fringe possibility that forecasters are mentioning as a theoretical extreme. It is a scenario that has meaningful weight in the ensemble of computer models being run by meteorologists across Europe, the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, the Met Office, and several other major forecasting centers all run what are called ensemble models, where dozens or even hundreds of slightly different versions of the atmosphere are simulated to capture the range of possible outcomes. The spread of those outcomes is what gives forecasters their probability estimates. When 10% of those model runs show 35 degrees, that is not noise. That is a genuine signal that the atmosphere has the potential to deliver that outcome under the right combination of circumstances. Tuesday currently looks likely to be among the hottest days of the entire event, with temperatures potentially reaching 33 degrees Celsius across parts of the south. After that, temperatures are expected to gradually ease, though they should remain comfortably above average for late May. The cooling will not be dramatic or sudden. High pressure is expected to remain close to the UK throughout much of the following week, continuing to deliver sunshine, light winds, and largely dry conditions. This is not a pattern that switches off overnight. The warmth embedded in this weather system is substantial enough to keep temperatures elevated even as the sharpest peak passes. For those outside the immediate core of the heat, the experience of this bank holiday weekend will still be significantly warmer than normal. Parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and northwest England will remain somewhat cooler, with cloud and occasional rain at times, particularly as Atlantic weather systems try to edge in from the west. But across the vast majority of England and Wales, and especially in the south and east, this weekend will feel like a full summer event. Coastal resorts are already bracing for enormous visitor numbers as people take advantage of the sunshine and warmth. Roads leading to popular seaside destinations are expected to see significant congestion, particularly on Bank Holiday Monday when the heat is forecast to be at or near its peak. Understanding what this weather event means in the context of climate change requires stepping back and looking at the longer trend. The UK has been warming steadily over the past century, and the pack E of that warming has accelerated in recent decades. Every one of the top 10 warmest years for the UK since records began in 1884 has occurred since the year 2002. Not a single one of those warmest years belongs to the 19th century or the first half of the 20th century. The climate baseline has shifted, and it has shifted significantly. In 2022, the UK recorded 40.3 degrees Celsius in Coningsby, Lincolnshire, smashing all previous records by a margin that would have seemed impossible just a few decades earlier. In summer 2025, the southeast of England experienced temperatures reaching 35.8 degrees Celsius in Faversham on the 1st of July. The conditions that would once have been considered extreme outliers are appearing with increasing regularity, and they are appearing earlier in the calendar year. Research published by the Met Office and supported by climate scientists around the world is unambiguous on this trend. Heat waves are becoming more frequent, more intense, and longer in duration as the planet warms. By 2050, the UK is projected to be 50% more likely to experience hot summers compared to the late 20th century baseline. Heat-related deaths in England and Wales, which currently sit at around 2,000 to 2,500 per year during warm periods, could triple to approximately 7,000 annually if warming continues on its current trajectory. The chance of experiencing temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius in the UK is now more than 20 times higher than it was in the 1960s, and it has nearly tripled since the year 2000 alone. There is also research suggesting that 12 consecutive days above 35 degrees may become physically possible within the current century, a prospect that would represent a fundamental transformation of the British summer as most people understand it. The May 2026 bank holiday heatwave sits within this broader story. It may or may not produce a reading of 35 degrees somewhere in southern England. The most likely outcome is slightly cooler than that, though still unprecedented for this point in the calendar. But the fact that 35 degrees in May is being discussed as a real meteorological possibility, rather than a fantasy, is itself a marker of how much the climate envelope has shifted. A 10% chance of 35 degrees in late May would have been essentially zero a generation ago. The event is possible now, not just because of a perfect temporary alignment of weather patterns, but because the background temperature of the atmosphere against which those weather patterns operate has been elevated by decades of rising greenhouse gas concentrations. Yourweather.co.uk has been clear and measured in how it has communicated the 35-degree possibility. The forecast does not say 35 will happen. It says there's a 10% chance. That distinction matters enormously for how the public should interpret the information. The most prepared and sensible response is to plan for the most likely outcome, which is a very hot late May weekend with temperatures in the low 30s across southern Britain, while acknowledging that conditions could develop in a more extreme direction. Whether you are managing your own health, looking after elderly relatives, planning outdoor activities, or simply deciding whether to travel somewhere on Bank Holiday Monday, the forecast gives you the information you need to make a sensible decision. Stay hydrated. Avoid prolonged exposure during the peak afternoon heat. Keep spaces cool. Check on neighbors and family members who might be vulnerable. Those precautions are appropriate across the full range of likely temperature outcomes. The fact that the UKHSA issued alerts before the official heat season began is a sign that the agencies responsible for public health in the UK are taking this event seriously and adapting their response frameworks to a climate where extreme heat can no longer be assumed to arrive only in July or August. The thermal experience of a typical British year is changing, and the public health infrastructure is beginning to adjust to that reality. Early warning systems, better building design standards, and improved public communication around heat risk are all tools that will matter more as the decades progress. So here is where everything stands as the bank holiday weekend moves through its most intense phase. The UK is in the middle of an exceptional warmth event for May. Temperatures in southern England have already exceeded records for this time of year. The most likely peak is around 30 to 33 degrees Celsius, which would itself be historic. There is a 10% chance, according to yourweather.co.uk and the Met Office Ensemble data, that temperatures could reach 35 degrees somewhere in southern England, which would be unprecedented for any May day in UK history. The warmth will persist beyond the bank holiday weekend, with high pressure maintaining above average temperatures through much of the following week before any gradual return toward more typical spring conditions. And behind all of this, the long-term trend continues. The UK's climate is warming, its weather extremes are intensifying, and the conversation about 35 degrees in May will become less shocking with every passing decade if current trajectories hold. It is also worth thinking about what this kind of event means for the millions of people who live and work in cities across southern England, because urban areas experience heat waves very differently from the surrounding countryside. The urban heat island effect is a well-documented meteorological phenomenon where the dense concentration of buildings, roads, concrete, and human activity causes cities to retain and radiate significantly more heat than surrounding green spaces and rural land. London, in particular, can run 4 to 5 degrees warmer than the countryside around it during heatwave conditions, simply because the city's infrastructure absorbs heat during the day and releases it slowly overnight. This means that while a rural weather station in Kent might record 31 degrees at its peak, central London could easily be sitting at 34 or 35 degrees during the same afternoon, even if the broader regional forecast only calls for the low 30s. It is a detail that matters enormously for the people living in flats, without air conditioning, working in older buildings with poor ventilation, or commuting on underground rail systems that were never designed to handle temperatures of this magnitude. The tube network in London becomes a particular concern during events like this. Deep line stations, such as those on the Central, Jubilee, and Victoria lines, can see platform temperatures well above air temperature outside during summer heat waves, sometimes exceeding 40 degrees Celsius in enclosed areas. Authorities typically issue guidance advising passengers to carry water, choose above-ground routes where possible, and avoid peak travel times during the hottest parts of the day. These are sensible precautions, but they also highlight how infrastructure designed for the British climate of a few decades ago is increasingly struggling to cope with the new thermal reality. The same challenge applies to older hospital buildings, care homes, schools, and housing stock that was built without any expectation of needing to manage sustained heat of this intensity. Whether or not this particular weekend writes itself into the UK record books at 35 degrees, what is already happening is remarkable enough. The bank holiday of May 2026 will be remembered as one of the most exceptional weather events of the spring in modern British meteorological history. And the number everyone will be watching as forecasters track every cloud, every wind shift, every subtle nudge in the position of that high pressure ridge is 35. It might happen. It might fall just short, but the fact that it is genuinely in play is the story that matters, and yourweather.co.uk has been at the center of telling it with clarity, honesty, and the kind of precision that gives people real information rather than empty headlines.